We've got trail camera pictures, Ring doorbell footage, of you can just see the little antenna sticking out.
Our hens that tend to nest on what you would consider goat terrain, those rocky outcroppings, that's just big mature timber, tend to be the ones that are successful at hatching young.
One in particular went about 14 miles and ended up having a successful hatch and went another 6 with a brood.
Is that common when they get flushed off the nest?
Yeah.
That they abandon
They're just
that?
going to start, they're just going to try again somewhere else.
Hello and welcome to Call of the Outdoors, the podcast of the Pennsylvania Game Commission. It is turkey time, and we have some wildlife techs joining us today from all across the state to talk about the turkey study that's happening right here in Pennsylvania. Stay tuned. I'm excited to talk about turkeys, and I'm excited to learn what we've learned in the last 3 years with this wild turkey project. For Pennsylvania hunters and conservationists, our roots run deep. The episodes we bring to you on the Pennsylvania Game Commission's podcast, Call of the Outdoors, will take a deep dive into exposing the incredible work being done by agency staff and partners, including statewide habitat projects, the science behind wildlife management, and what drives agency decisions. The Pennsylvania Game Commission's mission is twofold: to manage and protect wildlife and their habitats for not only current but future generations, and to promote hunting and trapping in the Keystone State. We got a packed house here at Call the Outdoors today, and I'm excited about it. We're talking about turkeys. I mean, if you can't get I just got goosebumps because we're in that time of year. You know, the winter's ending, the cold weather, getting some warm weather. People are hearing them gobble, and we're talking about the projects that we have going on here at the Game Commission. We're studying turkeys. You guys are out there in the field every day, and I want you all to introduce yourselves. I want to start right here on my left and tell them what you do for the Game Commission and like your mission on a pretty much daily basis.
Yeah, so I'm Andrew Cushman. I'm the wildlife technician in Management Unit 3D in the Northeast region. So I oversee a crew of 3 other individuals, pretty much just operate day-to-day operations for some turkey work that we're doing.
So what's your nickname?
The guys up there just call me the turkey guy.
I love it.
Yeah, so my name is Rachel Pennell. I work out of the Southeast region, particularly Wildlife Management Unit 5C. I've got a crew of 3 folks, and whether that's tracking birds, trapping birds, it's turkeys every day.
And your nickname?
My nickname's Turkey Girl. Yep.
I'm seeing something like a common pattern.
Yeah, there's a trend there. I'm the turkey guy for the North Central, which of the regions is probably the best of them all. So 4D wildlife technician, and it's just as Rachel and Andrew said, turkeys all day, every day.
And your name's Tony.
It is Tony. It is Tony.
Well, thank you for coming down. I know you guys are busy and in the middle of things, and I know a lot of things are wrapping up. And, I'm going to go to Rachel. Give us a brief overview of the turkey study that's been going on, where we're at, and there's a little bit left of it too before results come out.
Sure, yeah. So this project was initiated in 2022, that winter. And the idea is that we're putting these backpack transmitters, they're little units like this, and they've got a little antenna on the back on hens across 4 study areas, so 3D, 2D, 5C, and 4D. Every year there's 25 of those backpack transmitters that get put out for 100 across the state for a 4-year period. That's 400 transmitters. And what we're looking at with those tracking units, it takes a GPS coordinate 24/7, 365. We program them differently for different seasons, so sometimes every hour, sometimes every half an hour. But what we're trying to get at is that fine scale data of where are these hens going and why are they going where they're going. We know that there's a lot of questions that researchers, turkey hunters have. Where are hens making their nests? How many nesting attempts are they making? How many eggs are they laying? Are all of those laid eggs actually hatching? Where do they take their broods when they're successful? What do they do when they're unsuccessful? And so with all of those questions and these tracking units, we determined that there's 5 factors that are influencing turkey populations that are being investigated as part of the study. Those are habitat, disease, hunter success, predation, and weather patterns. That's kind of the general overview. Feel free to tag in Tony and Andrew.
Well, I think a lot of those things that we're looking at are, we, as turkey hunters, we make educated guesses all the time, and I've heard all kinds of theories. And the coolest part about this is the data that we're going to get, that we're going to really be able to answer some questions. And is there any other parts of the study? I know there's some other things that we're looking at too.
Yeah, so let's just say this went from a Pennsylvania study to a whole Northeast Atlantic study with Ohio, Maryland, New Jersey's involved. I think Rhode Island even jumped on board. Parts of West Virginia, Virginia.
Now.
So this is blowing up, which is phenomenal for the turkey community. And then there's been side projects as well, which I think we're going to get into later, Matt, with some of the disease stuff as well as gobbling crippling loss with Penn State. But yeah, it definitely blew up, and it's been quite the ride.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I can't imagine waking up every day and just being with turkeys. I'm not used to picking one up and then letting it back go. Usually when I'm picking one up, it's like it's flopping. But we'll get to that later. We're going to get to maybe some tips you might have for our turkey hunters too. Anything that you want to add to that about the study?
I think they covered it all pretty well. I know we'll touch on a little bit on how we trap them a little bit later on too.
So you guys and girls are in touch every day. You're talking, strategizing, and been together kind of what, 4 years, 3 years? How long have you been working together?
Yeah, the three of us have been together since the start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. And you're going to be here till you finish, right?
I'd say I did. Yeah.
I got you. So, like, for those that don't know, like, we have to catch these turkeys. And, wild turkey's pretty slick. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we catch them to get them radio collared and whatever else. You're probably taking samples and all kinds of things. You want to take that one, Tony?
Sure. So turkey trapping, we use bait. Get them onto bait, and we shoot a net over them. But there's different forms, and we all kind of have our different ways of doing it. The rocket net is probably the most common that people know.
Thank God somebody invented that.
Thank God. And you can go on YouTube and look up that. We have different ways how we go about doing that, but it's all generally the same way. We get them onto bait, get them on a pattern, then you shoot a net over them.
And you go there to set up, and they don't show up.
Yeah, that's turkey trapping.
Right.
You might think you have a pattern, and then turkeys being turkeys, they don't show up. Then you try again, or you wait to get them back on a pattern. It's really what conditions are happening, or is somebody else feeding wildlife nearby that they're going to you didn't know about before. But we've also tried different methods too. Drop net. We kind of got told that Easterns, you wouldn't be able to catch them under drop net like you can with Rios and Merriams. So of course we had to debunk this, and we did it. And now all three of us have drop nets.
Oh, no
They
kidding.
do work. It takes a little time to get them conditioned under them, but they do work. And the nice part with them is it's less invasive, like the feather loss. You don't see it and all that. However, these turkeys don't get tangled, so they can just stand up and run out under the net and get away. But yeah, it's
So once the net drops on them, what do you do next? Run as fast as we can. Try to get on top of them. So, like Tony said, the rocket net, they get tangled up pretty good. But with the drop net, they pretty much just, it lands on them. They can stand up and pretty much run right out. So, yeah.
Are they hard to catch?
Sometimes, yeah. We'll throw blankets on them, try to calm them down. The darkness helps keep them calm and everything. Gotcha. But one little movement might give them a little bit of light, and they start freaking out again. So
I mean, when you think about a turkey's life, ever since the day it's hatched out of that egg, something's trying to eat it. And they're so aware of their surroundings. And I can. Have you ever seen a turkey get the best of somebody when you're trapping them, like flog them?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Personally, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Scars from Spurs and everything.
in my hand this past
But
season.
it is funny, though, and you guys can chime in on this. Like, I've noticed with the hens, once you get them in hand, they kind of just give up. They give in. Like, this is my fate. Okay. And they're just as calm as can be.
Yeah, I've seen like people holding them like it looks like
Yep.
they're pets.
No, it's funny because I was driving on my way in and I was like, yeah, I wonder what, yeah, we did domesticate turkeys. It's like, yeah, what an idea that they kind of chill like that. But
Yeah, they do. Yeah, true. And they do. But even when you get like a barnyard turkey in the springtime, a gobbler, they get mean. I mean, very mean. And we had one in the parking lot yesterday at the game
saw
commission,
that.
and he's looking at him as smart as much credit as we give turkeys. He's looking at himself in a car and just trying to beat himself up in the in the reflection. And it's like they can do some damage to your paint for sure.
Yeah.
They're tough. They're tough birds, and they're very resilient. And myself and all the turkey hunters in Pennsylvania appreciate what's going on today because we're learning. To date, this is the biggest study ever. I'm for sure in the Northeast. It might even be throughout the country. And when you look at some of the information that's out there and the tests that have been done, a lot of the information we have on wild turkeys in your field, in the science field, is old. I mean, we've been following these practices for a long time. So there's going to be a lot come out of this. when can our folks out there expect the results from this study? Nobody's going to hold you to it.
No,
what are we looking at?
I think 2027 is when you'll see things finalized and published. If we're lucky, maybe 26. But all the dates I've personally seen thus far, we have been 2027.
That's the goal.
Yes.
I mean, that's the goal. So, I mean, and obviously when that happens, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about those results because I feel like we're going to find some really cool stuff, technology. I mean, let's talk about like when you have that turkey there, if you're not putting a radio transmitter on, what else do you do to those turkeys, the samples that you take from them?
Sure. So turkeys that get transmitters, every turkey that ends up under the net at that point there for our research purposes, they'll get a leg band. And it's important to note too that like as we're talking about turkey trapping, we talk about rocket netting and we use recreational explosives for that, and we follow U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service trapping protocols with that, and we all go through extensive training. We're in the PSU, Penn State University's poultry barns. With our vet staff and some other wildlife health folks through University of Pennsylvania, training us on how to do blood draws, how to do the different swabbing techniques that we utilize when we're collecting all these samples from the turkey. So transmitted birds will get a cloacal swab, a tracheal swab, and then a blood draw that's analogous to like if you were going to draw blood from like the top of your ankle. You're essentially hitting its bone, blood, bone. That doesn't hurt the birds at all. We're able to stop the bleeding super quick. We know that these are invasive practices to the bird, but we're trying our best to move efficiently and as quickly as possible so they can be released. So as we put blankets on the turkeys, they go into these turkey boxes, and sometimes the boxes can freak some landowners out, even some food and cover guys, because historically these boxes have been used for trap and transfer projects through National Wild Turkey Federation. It's important to note that for this project, we are not taking the turkeys anywhere. The only places that I have maybe taken turkeys, I held some birds overnight last year. So they were moved from the property, brought to the state game lands that was 5 minutes away, and then brought back the following morning to be released at sunrise. We try not to release them too late in the evening because they end up ground roosting, and that just puts the birds at more risk for predation after we do all this manipulation stuff to the birds, right? So these biological samples then are sent to University of Pennsylvania in our Wildlife Futures program, which is a agreement kind of between Pennsylvania Game Commission and University of Pennsylvania. All of our sample, like even your CWD testing and stuff like that, all goes through those guys. And what we're looking at with those biological samples is different viruses that turkeys can have, and we know that they're on the landscape. We're just not certain of their prevalence, and this goes back to one of those 5 factors that go and influence the turkey populations. And we're also looking at parasite loading, as well as the co-infections of both. So does she have a parasite? Does she have a virus? Does she have both? And how does that impact how many eggs she's laying, how many nesting attempts she's making? How does that contribute to her overall fitness of the population?
Most people, when you look at turkeys and disease, you think of pox, avian pox.
Yes.
That's like one of the most common ones you see, and it's very noticeable. But there's probably, you're getting to a lot more problems that a turkey can have, a lot more diseases that are out there and parasites, and that'll be cool to find that out, and how it affects all the stuff that's going on. Because when you think about, for a turkey to get its feathers and make it, how tough it is for a mama hen to raise one poult to success. And I mean, it's almost like, how did this happen? And I'm glad you hit on that point too, because we hear it all the time. Like, we're trapping turkeys and we're trading them for things all over. I mean, you're right. It did happen at one time. I mean, when you look at populations across the country, Target 2000 from the NWTF was huge. I mean, there's turkeys in places. There was never turkeys here on Elmerton Avenue in Harrisburg. I grew up in Lingelstown. We never had turkeys off that mountain. And when you look at where they're at today, they're everywhere. I mean, even like your old home state of New York. Long Island. There's turkeys in the middle of the city down there.
Yep. Yeah, they're booming out there. I mean, you probably got to run into more cars killing them than anything, unfortunately. But yeah, they're definitely booming out there.
So when you any of those kind of hit at what those biological samples, is there anything else that you're getting data from that particular bird when you have it under the net, Tony?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, right. Just looking at any bird, we're looking at sex ratios, age ratios, and that's all going to go into the population model. Which in turn is going to get used for the harvest model, especially with those males. And what was interesting, just for this year alone, is we talked about years ago having a really good hatch out in 4D. Well, this year we were catching 2-year-old toms left and right. It was unreal.
You can't say that too loud.
Okay. No, that's all right. I mean, everybody, as a turkey hunter, everybody loves suicidal 2-year-olds. They talk, but that's
when turkey hunting's good. When you have a good hatch and there's a bunch of 2-year-olds, it's a bunch of high school boys out there.
What game lands is this?
Yeah, I'll just say 4D, but it was interesting to see that, after what we kind of saw with the data 2 years ago, and then to see that this year, which it lines up as far as the hatch goes. Yeah,
I love to hear. And we've had. I mean, if you look at the last 2-3 springs, we've had really good years of weather, and obviously weather does affect the hatch. It has to. I mean, when you look at, we have real bad years. It's rainy, cold, nasty springs, and I saw a lot of jakes last year. So I'm across the state. I mean, not every, and there's cycles. I mean, your area might be good, and your area might have had some bad weather in that crucial time. I mean, I would guess we're going to find a lot more about that when the study's over. But I mean, just like cicadas. Anywhere I've been in the country, 2 years after that giant cicada hatch, the population seems to be strong, or at least more gobbles. And that's totally anecdotal. It's just something that I've noticed. And, Mary Jo and I have talked about that quite a bit when I first got here, because it was something that we tried to follow in the industry I was in. Like, if we could find some place where cicadas, 2 years after that, we're trying to get there to go turkey hunting, because it's some of the best days you ever have in the woods.
Yeah.
But, one of the questions, and if there's any questions or myths you want to put out at any time, please, we kind of talked, it's an ongoing joke, but we do not trade turkeys for martins or
coyotes. Lions or coyotes.
Have you all seen a mountain lion while you're out there yet?
No.
You'd think about, with all those turkeys around here, that if we had a mountain lion, it would be in there after them, wouldn't you?
Now, bobcats, that's a different story.
Yeah, we won't go there. And predation is something that's a big topic across the country, and I'm glad that that's part of the study. And I want to get to you a little bit later on that crippling project, because we're looking at technology today and ammunition and choke tubes and the TSS revolution, and people are shooting at turkeys at a longer distance. And I mean, it has to be out there. Turkeys are tough. I mean, there's no doubt. I'm glad to hear about that. But one of the things that we hear, we get a lot of questions, whether it's GM comments or on social media, and I guess people have been around those trapping sites, and they're asking that question, like, why, you come in and trap turkeys, and you do your work, you release them in the same spot, and you don't see those turkeys for maybe a week or two. Is there any explanation to that?
Yeah. So with the rocket net in particular, I mean, it's an explosive, so it's definitely starting for the whole flock. But then, like Rachel had said earlier, it is pretty invasive, the kind of work that we're doing, taking these samples. So usually it just takes a couple weeks, and they acclimate to the transmitter or the experience in general as well. We have seen with the drop net being used with magnets, it's a lot less startling for these individuals, and they typically come back relatively quick. But yeah, it's just a traumatizing experience for them.
Well, turkeys are they're nervous all the time anyway in life. I mean, it's, you think about, like, we went home tonight and somebody exploded something and threw a net over our head. We'd walk in there the next day a little bit more cautious. And I mean, it's just animals. I mean, we're a predator on them, and that, I mean, we get it, but they're going to be back. It's not going to hurt them. And it's so important for the future. When we look at things, we hear this a lot about prescribed fire. We get a lot of people that are just raising Cain over prescribed fire. But when you look at the long-term benefits of it, I mean, yeah, there might be some habitat to make better habitat that we have to give and take to get there. When you look at the long-term benefit of that prescribed fire and how good it is for the habitat and the future of the species that benefit from that, the pros way outweigh the cons. And we get that part of it, and just trying to answer some questions that are out there. But
before we move on, I know he had touched on a couple weeks. I mean, I've had mine back in 2 days. And those locators, I mean, they give me a coordinate every half an hour, every hour. Maybe they don't come right to your bird feeder, but they're in your backyard, and I can tell you that even if you weren't home.
Let's talk about how the transmitters work. How you're getting that data from those transmitters. Once you put it, let's take it. You put it, you backpack it.
Turkeys get released in groups, sure. So they go back in those transport boxes, and then they get released in groups, so that they're seeing the rest of their flock mates as they're released. And we found that's something that's kind of changed since the beginning of the project to now what we do. But we've seen that we're getting better results, and they're more flocked up immediately after release when we do that. essentially then that's trapping the turkeys. I always, when I'm talking to landowners, I'm like, that's the easy part, right? We show up that day, we're there for all day, and we've got a crew and we're all helping each other out, and we release the birds. Then that's when the real work begins. The GPS transmitters are designed to have a battery life of 2 years. So those GPS coordinates every half an hour, every hour, depending on the time of the year, are stored on the device itself. So I'm not able to log into the computer. There's some transmitters that have that capability. These hen transmitters do not. I have to go into the field and retrieve that data off of that tag. And I have a little specialized computer and a couple antennas and a thing that beeps at a frequency similar to your car radio. And essentially that transmitter pings, and it ping, ping, ping. And I'm able to judge how far I am from it as well as what direction it is to get close enough to be able to download that data. Wow. From there, it's on an SD card. I can throw that in my computer, load the file into GPS Google Earth, and see exactly where that turkey went. And I can see that she's with her buddies, and they're mirroring. We call it mirroring when they're all kind of moving together like that. But it's really important then too. We trap them in the winter and we can see what their winter movements are like. But especially this time of year, as we're transitioning from trapping into spring dispersal and nesting season, April through the end of June, they'll start dispersing away from their flocks. So we'll be in the field more tracking our birds. I know Tony had one that dispersed quite a ways. Yep. I'm anticipating that mine will do that soon, but I've not had any of those.
Are you noticing a difference in the geographic location of time? For my brain says spring breakup. That's what we've always called it. When
Sure.
this happens, are yours dispersing first before the northern turkeys, or is there any difference? Or are they all pretty much the same?
So I'd say in the past,
I know we're not supposed to really give away.
Maybe, and I can say anecdotally my earliest nest incubation. So turkeys will have their 9 to 14 days of egg laying, and she lays her egg every day at that same spot. And we're able to go into that GPS location data, and I'm able to pick out where that nest is even before she starts incubating. Because then when she's incubating, I get a coordinate every half an hour, and those are all on top of each other. I mean, we know where the nest is. Now, sometimes with landowners, I can't tell you exactly where that nest is. I can say that there's a turkey nesting on your property. I can say it's over there or it's over there. Go about your business. If you're going to mow your grass, do exactly what you're going to do, change nothing. But, as I'm getting access so that I can visit that nest then, that's kind of what we talk about. But so as they're egg laying and their nest incubating, I've seen as early as April 5th that's the first nest that I've had initiated by a hen for incubation.
Oh, she's already laid and sitting?
She's already laid and sitting
Wow.
as of April 5th. They say that the average is early May, mid-May. So a lot of those hatch dates are around Memorial Day weekend, which is
Right.
typically first cutting and hay season, right?
Right.
So in the Southeast region, I get a lot that get whacked then. But as far as what the transmitters tell us and all of that kind of good stuff. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I can't wait
And
to see that
you've
stuff.
got your one that's dispersing.
Yeah, I think we need to take a step back before
Sure.
we get to nesting and incubation with dispersal, because it tends to blow a lot of minds how far some of these hens go. I mean, last year we had a bird in 4D that traveled 35 miles to where she finally said okay from her fall flock to where she was going to breed. And this year already, just last week between Monday and Friday, we had a hen travel 11.7 miles, and she's potentially still going. And it's interesting because it might be a juvenile, which people think, okay, juveniles are going to get pushed out, they're going to disperse. Not necessarily. I think Andrew too has had some, but we had 2 adult hens last year go 17 miles together before they broke off. I'll be curious as far as the results go with dispersal, how that works. We don't tend to see that as far with the males, but out in central PA, yeah, the hens, they can cover some ground. And once they decide to start going, they don't stop. I'm going to walk until I have to get in the roost that night, and then I'm going to continue it till I get to my destination. And that could be a period of 2 days or 10 days. Just depends how far they want to go.
That's crazy. That just tells you girls are smarter than we are.
Yep, yeah.
Well, and I haven't had any go 35 miles per se, but I know local folks, I've had them go from the east side of Lake Nockamixon to the west side of Lake Nockamixon. And how different is that habitat from one side of the lake to the other? I don't know, but that's where that adult hen decided she wanted to be, and she made that trip in a week.
It's probably a bigger power than us, and when you think about things like that and getting away from family bloodlines, or who knows what that is. I'm just taking a stab at it. I probably shouldn't even weigh in on.
No,
that
you're right
stuff,
though,
but-
because gene flow is a big thing to
Right.
prevent inbreeding. And I mean, we definitely see it out there. There's definitely gene flow occurring, and it, she might stop along the way and actually breed with a male, and then breed with another male to wherever she's going. Which I don't think we're going to get all into that paternity stuff, but
Well, I was going to ask you, so, since you brought it up,
Okay.
I mean, is
Yeah.
there any?
so that's something else that's going on with the study as well. We're collecting eggs and egg membranes from hatched eggs that's going to the University of Pennsylvania, and they're looking at that for paternity. And it's discussion, I would say, across the nation, at least at the very least, the east side of the nation is looking at multiple paternity. How many males are fathering one clutch of eggs? And is that a way to improve? Is that the way a hen is selecting to improve her fitness and her offspring's fitness?
So when I'm out there calling, I'm trying to be that hen that every gobbler wants to be with.
Absolutely.
That's my goal. But in all reality, there has to be something to that. Because when you just watching turkeys and the breeding ritual and how it happens, you always wonder how. Obviously we know the dominance factor and all that, but like that selection, that hen is so crucial to which gobbler it is she's going to be around. I mean, it's pretty cool. I can't wait for some of this stuff to happen. It's even getting better. Do you finding anything out there in your area like that on dispersal?
Yeah. I mean, we've had some hens. We might touch on a little bit later with some broods that have gone significant distances as well too. But yeah, one in particular went about 14 miles and ended up having a successful hatch and went another 6 with a brood before even they were 2 weeks old. So yeah, we see it. I mean, we're in some pretty dense woods, in some certain parts, 3D.
Right.
They'll travel it too. So.
Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of factors in that, but it's just great information to have because, when you even myself, like my microcosm where I live, my turkeys disappear in October. Once the white oaks are down and they're gone, I don't see a turkey till winter. And then every year, end of February, beginning of March, all of a sudden they show back up on my little ridge, where there's water. And I mean, it's just a great place. And they're there till about turkey season, then they disappear again. And you always wonder, like, where do they go? I mean, they have their mind made up, or they know where there's greener pastures or whatever it is. And then hunting pressure is, that has something to do with things too, the way they move around my place, because it gets hit pretty hard.
I think that's a big thing for the hunters that are going to be watching this, is because we've put transmitters on gobblers. The birds you see in the winter at your place probably aren't the birds that you're actually hunting that spring. And as they break up to form their social groups, a few might stay, but a few are going to push off, and you're going to have others come in. And that's something still to be learned as far as, well, why are they doing that? Because I think, down south, Dr. Mike Chamberlain has looked at it is actually beneficial for maybe a less dominant bird to support a dominant bird for breeding rights, even though he's not the one directly doing the breeding of the hens.
That's that looker. You got a strutter and a looker.
Yes.
And that looker always gets you. Gets you as a turkey hunter. Like because the strutters, his snoot's hanging way down. You told him stuff that like dirtiest stuff in the world, and he's coming in there and looking at your decoy, and it's that looker that gets you every time. I mean, that's the less dominant turkey. I mean, the one that's not displaying. That's my redneck science right there.
No, it's great.
So when talking about incubating in the backpacks, does it interfere with any of the incubating process, or is that backpack that hen's wearing? Is it she can pretty much function normally?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. She'll function normally. So when we attach them, it's a backpack that they're wearing, but we actually have a spacer block that we'll put on as we're attaching it. Make sure it's loose enough, but not too loose that it's going to slip off. We haven't seen any sort of implications, awesome, saying that it affects birds incubating.
So it's just regular life after that thing's on there.
Yeah, it may take a few days after it's deployed for them to get acclimated, but after that, they function just as normal.
Awesome.
As normal.
Yeah, because they'll preen it in and everything. We've got trail camera pictures, Ring doorbell footage, of you can just see the little antenna sticking out.
Yep.
So let's talk about that for a second,
Sure.
preening, because
Sure.
it's something that obviously we've all seen dust bowls where they're taking a bath, but like every we made decoys for my old job, and like Avian X decoys, and I'm not giving them a plug. That's we were really big on trying to make it lifelike and preening, and like when you see a wild turkey out there, their feathers are always perfect.
Yeah.
Like they're gobblers and hens, and there's something to it. If you want to hit on preening, why does a turkey preen?
Yeah, I mean, so they're getting themselves comfortable. They're rearranging, rearranging. But sometimes too, that like dust in there can keep all the the feather lice and parasites off of them.
So they take a bath when they're dusting.
Yes, they do. They do. And it's funny because as we talk about like turkey trapping and things like that, sometimes we'll put the bait out and we're like, yeah, they hit it at like 10 o'clock in the afternoon, this, that, the other thing, not realizing that they're going to spend 2-3 hours in the wood line before they come to the bait pile, dusting and preening. And we're just there waiting.
They're teasing you.
Yep, and waiting and watching, and you're like, oh, I'd really love to get out of the truck to go pee in the woods right now. It's like, nope, can't get out of the truck. The turkeys are just right over there. It's like, oh, but yeah.
Part of it. That's the struggles. And,
yeah.
When you think about a turkey's life, you guys out there every day, your boots are dirty. I mean, you're out there with them, and you're learning the habits of these turkeys that lots of people take it, just like grit. That's a big one. People don't realize that turkeys need that every day of their, to digest. And correct me if I'm wrong. I would imagine that like they have to get grit because I would imagine when it's in their crawl, they expel it daily, so they have
absolutely.
to replenish that.
They do. And personally, we've even mixed them in with our bait because we've seen them pick it up on those years. Actually, this is one of the years we did it because we had the way the weather was. We had such an ice pack up on the mountains that they couldn't get to anything, and there'd be birds that would come in and just pick at the stones. They didn't even want the bait. Behaviorally, as you just said, Matt, the work we get to do, I mean, I personally feel blessed because it is phenomenal what we get to see working with these birds every day out there. And it's, from a turkey hunter's perspective, a lot that I wouldn't know, or how many different sounds and vocalizations these birds can make versus just what everybody thinks of, maybe your purr, your yelp, your cut, and your cluck, like way more than that.
Well, they're talking to themselves.
Way more than that. And then, the feeling and emotion behind it versus just the sound itself.
Sometime we need to go visit Denny Galvis. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a podcast with Denny Galvis. He's an old turkey caller, a friend, retired, and he probably spends more time with wild turkeys than anybody in the country is because he records them and like he's under turkey roost. I guarantee this morning he was under turkey. He doesn't care about gobblers anymore. He vowed never to hunt gobblers again. A long time ago, he made a promise with the turkey gods, but he loves this kind of stuff, and he's begging to hear some of this information. So sometime we'll get you guys.
Is he the gentleman that's gotten our poult counts?
Done our poult calls.
As far as doing the brooding work and stuff, that might be the gentleman that actually records all that for us to call the hens in. So
he's been on our podcast before.
We know of him.
Yeah, and he's not a science biologist by any stretch, but he's so. I mean, when I was a kid, he would pipe. He had wild turkeys in a pen that he raised in captivity, and he'd pipe the sounds like into his bedroom. Like he wants to know why a turkey yelps and why they're making that and the inflection, and he'll say the same thing. The range and stuff, the vocalizations that turkeys make that we don't know about or we can't hear because we're not close enough, and they're talking to each other just like we do every day, and you guys get to experience that on a daily basis. I'm jealous of that. When you think about nest sites, when we're going down the list here. From some of the preliminary data, and I know we can't get too in depth before everything's final, but like, do you see the hens using the same nest sites annually, year after year? Areas maybe.
I'd say it's a mix.
I'd say some isolated events for sure. I know myself and Rachel definitely have had some overlap from previous years. Within the same general area for certain. So, but I'll let Rachel elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I have to give a little plug here because Penn State University, Kyle Smelter, like this is all part of his nesting model and things like that. So there will be more like concrete evidence coming from this. But just anecdotally, I had a hen in 2022. She made a nest, had her successful brood. She didn't hatch till August. So some of our birds, I've had birds in 5C. I don't think you guys have had it happen quite as often as I do, but I've had birds make 4 nesting attempts in a single season. So this was her 3rd attempt, hatched in August. Brood success. We were able to follow those poults and everything was good. She made it through that winter, and then come the following spring, it was April, and she's less than 100 yards from the same tree that she had her successful nest. Now, vegetation on the ground looks very different August versus April. So that April nest, the landowner was walking their dog and the puppy flushed her, and she did not return. There were 17 eggs in that nest bowl. So it's interesting because it seems like they have a tendency to know I was successful here, I'm going to go back. But the thing is on that landscape between August and April is that habitat is drastically different.
Right. Yep. Are we finding any common ground where a hen will nest, or is it vary?
So I tend to like to say, even when our foresters and folks ask, like it seems like it's like waist high, about a yard up off the ground, whether that's, in a hayfield on their second nesting attempt as that's greening up, or that's Japanese barberry, multiflora rose. That's what I typically see a lot of my hens using. They're in those kinds of thickets. Now, I can't say that they're any more or less successful in those patches of invasives than they are in something of native, but that's seems like what is offering them the best cover, cover from predators from the ground, but also from overhead. On this project, I'm surprised by the amount of owl predations. I never thought, oh yeah, an owl's going to eat the turkey growing up.
At one time, the great horned owl was one of probably the biggest predator on wild turkeys.
Yeah.
And I remember old studies back in in the 80s. You'd hear that quite a bit. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But we don't realize that. It's just like bears. There's so many people that don't realize that a bear is a predator.
Yeah.
And hard on our whitetail fawns, and same thing with great horned owls. Yeah. Are you seeing any similarities? Your areas are all different.
It's drastic.
You don't have,
between the
you don't have
landscapes.
those invasives up there.
No,
as
we
much.
have a lot of rocks, which it's our successful hens. And this is just my observations. I don't want to steal Kyle's thunder here at Penn State, but our hens that tend to nest on what you would consider goat terrain, those rocky outcroppings, that's just big mature timber, tend to be the ones that are successful at hatching young. Maybe not rearing them to adulthood, but yeah, it's quite interesting. But the great horned owl thing has been huge. Because we'll lose 50 to 60% of our hens, and that's across all study areas just during nesting. And a lot of times we walk into just a decapitated bird, and she's targeting that hen on that nest just
at night.
Yeah,
I mean, and they're silent. I mean, that's what they're built to do. You can imagine. I mean, if you think about it, they're wicked, and it's. I mean, that's news has been around a long time, and I'm glad we're revisiting all that stuff because like we talked about earlier. Turkey's got a rough life. They're out there every day, and we think about a gobbler, springtime of the year. He's out there announcing his presence to everybody as loud as he can. I mean, that's when they become vulnerable to predation as well. I assume.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into that later. We lost one as a result to an eagle, and he had to be strutting in the middle of the day given the location he was at, a field with ankle high grass, and it was definitely an avian predation. And yeah, I mean, that was right in the middle of the season. That's
what we get for running our mouth too much, when you. So let's say we have you put these transmitters on a hen, and all of a sudden one goes missing. You're not getting a signal, and you feel it's still alive. How do you go about locating that? Let's talk about a day in the life of trying to find a missing hen out there.
Unfortunately, it's a lot of driving. For an extended period of time, we'll try to expend our ground searches as much as possible based on the terrain. But we're actually fortunate enough to be able to fly with Civil Air Patrol too, so we'll be able to do some aerial telemetry from fixed wing aircraft. So pretty much we'll just start at ground zero, I'll call it, last known location. After that, we'll just work radiuses out, just pretty much canvassing the whole area. There's some deep valleys. Try to really focus on those because signal might be blocked up.
So that plane's going down in there?
Not too much, but pretty much just trying to canvass the terrain as best as possible. So sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not.
Right.
So and other times we're fortunate enough to be able to find them from the ground. But yeah, just a lot of searching and trying to cover as much ground as possible because, as Tony said earlier, these birds move and they can cover a lot of ground quick.
Sure.
So
do you get attached to any of these turkeys?
I haven't personally. There's some that have become a headache that I know them for that.
I got you.
Versus,
you might get a personal vendetta against them. But,
Understood.
Yeah.
They're in an area that it's a pain to get into them.
Especially in your country.
Right.
I mean, it can in that big woods country up there.
Oh yeah, and I think we should give a shout out to a lot of 90% of the work we do is on private property, and a lot of these people are very interested in what we're doing. Because if it wasn't for that, I mean, we wouldn't have access. I mean, there's only so much public land that we're actually working on, and especially with trapping. I mean, they're down in the fields and that on private property on the farms.
Yeah, we got
or backyards.
Yeah, I'll say I don't have any turkeys for my study area on game lands. Some of our landowners get really into it and into hosting us and working with the wardens and stuff like that. And that particular property, I mean, those turkeys are there. They come back to their bird feeders, and then they disperse up to the game lands in 3D actually. And then I give his crew a phone call. I'm like, yo, you want to send me somebody to help me with a veg plot? Thanks.
Well, that's awesome though that we're getting that cooperation. I mean, the folks of the Commonwealth. I mean, that's what that's who provides us a living to, for our jobs and our mission here at the Game Commission. And those private landowners are vital to a lot of things, including this. And yeah, we definitely need to give them a shout out. And when you look at, like, every year we do I guess the month of July when we're asking the public to tell us where they see turkeys, that information is crucial to the Game Commission. It's crucial to it's like, we just need to know what's going on out there. The more of that information that we can get and the help with the public out there, the better that we can let the future. All of us are here for the future. I mean, that's one of the things that, that in the hunting community, it's tough. I talk to a lot of my friends that are in the hunting industry. I say, you got to think about, it's not this season that matters. It's 10 years from now. This stuff that we're doing, that you're a part of, is going to, probably rewrite some history books. And those practices are going to be affected long when our years are gone on this earth. And that's the cool thing about what the state wildlife agencies do in this project. And I'm so excited to hear more about it. Let's talk about thermal imaging, because I saw somebody had some footage at the PA NWTF rendezvous, and I don't know who it is, but if we could get a clip of that just to show maybe on here when this podcast goes live to the public, because that thermal imaging was pretty cool. And do everybody use it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what benefit does the thermal imaging have for this study?
We can see through all that vegetation that your naked eye you can't see through. It's wonderful. That the media that you're talking about is actually from the Western Study Area 2D,
Okay.
but I'm pretty sure we all have some. I know I personally don't have any good roosting ones like you saw. But yeah, I mean, it not only allows us to count turkeys as far as numbers go, a hen, poults, or whatever. It's a lot of times we don't want to disturb a hen and her poults, and so if that means I can see through grass from farther away, that's where that thermal imaging comes in handy. And even during the daytime, it might not be as effective as a cooler morning or at night, but it's still effective. And so yeah, it's been wonderful. But it's also great for trapping and locating birds. Like, how close are these birds actually roosting to where we got to sneak into?
Are you noticing that? And I've always said this about Pennsylvania, but, like, just again, a lot of this is anecdotal. But, like, when you say roosting, do you find that turkeys are roosting in the same areas generally, night after night, or?
Same areas, yes, but they might be in a totally different tree come morning.
Right.
Which, as a hunter, I'm sure you might think you have a gobbler pinned, and then he's in a tree 100 yards away, and they're hopping around. But yeah, they tend to use the same areas, but they'll bounce around. If we're talking a ridge, they might not be on the west end of the ridge; they might be on the east end, and they fluctuate.
Right. Right. There's no sure enough roost tree. You go to Texas and there's one tree and it
Right. Yeah.
Right.
turkeys
Yeah.
on it. I mean, that's
you can find the water in the trees. You found turkeys.
you can bet on those roosts. But, like, I say that all the time, like, Pennsylvania, it's so tough because there's lots of options. And what about water? Are you seeing water being crucial? A lot of people don't think about water when they go out, especially turkey hunters. But a turkey needs water every day of its life.
Absolutely.
And you go down south and or Oklahoma, and if there's water, there's turkeys roosting there somewhere. If there's turkeys on there, but what do you see here? Like, as a water source, where do most turkeys get that water from? Creeks, ponds, grass?
Oh, all of it. But you also got to consider how much water they can get from insects too. For those areas, down south where it's limited. But I mean, we've seen them use. Actually, we have video footage of a turkey not drinking water but swimming across a river. It landed a little too short. And
They can swim. I've seen them.
they can.
swim,
It's pretty wild. But yeah, they'll use a puddle. It don't matter if it's muddy or whatever. But in the winter, even maybe you guys haven't noticed it or not, but they'll actually eat snow.
Really?
Instead of going to a water source because it's frozen.
Makes sense.
Yep.
So if we're dehydrated somewhere and can't get to water, if we eat bugs, we'll be all right?
But there you go. I don't, as far as our digestive system goes, I don't know how that works, but in theory, it sounds like a good idea.
Anything else that that anybody wants to talk about before we talk about maybe some of the gobbler stuff that would be interesting to the public, or you have any good stories? We're into anything you want to talk about today.
I'll touch back on nesting selection for a bit. I mean, at least for us, we have some pretty variable landscapes across Management Unit 3D. So we got some ag, we got a lot of big forest. Fortunate enough for DCNR to cooperate with us as well to be able to do a lot of that research on there. But we've seen successful nests in wide open woods, just base of a tree. We've seen some in some of the thickest cover that you can barely even see through. So, I'd just say you would think that they'd pick the thickest spot possible where they have tons of cover, but sometimes that's not always the best spot for them.
Yeah, it's predictability is tough on that. Like, and I heard you say that you had a hen that she hatched in August, and that was her 4th attempt.
Third, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was she? Do we know if she went back to breed with a gobbler? I mean, they can actually store sperm, correct?
Yep.
Sure. So they say that with every successful fertilization, a turkey can lay 2 clutches of eggs successfully. So that means for a 3rd or a 4th attempt that their hormones have to be right for that additional fertilization.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's part of what they're looking at too with some of this University of Tennessee, multiple paternity, University of Pennsylvania stuff, is with all of that, does the sperm quality decline? Are all those eggs actually fertilized if they're laid in a 2nd attempt? Stuff like that.
I got you. That's awesome.
And how that influences the productivity of the hen.
But you also said that hen flushed the next spring off 17 eggs, and she
Yes.
didn't come back?
Nope, she did not.
Is that common when they get flushed off the nest?
Yeah.
That they
They're
abandon
just going
that?
to start. They're just going to try again somewhere else.
Yeah.
I got you, because they feel it was unsuccessful place. Just one time is all it takes?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd say it more depends on how much time they have invested in that nest. If it's early on in the incubation period, they're probably not coming back. If it's within a few days of hatch, they'd probably would try again. I'm sure.
I got you.
Sitting on that nest.
I have another question. So you're walking down a logging road in the north central part of the state, and all of a sudden there's an egg laying in the middle of the road. Is it true that Jennies just walk along and one pops out?
I mean, I can't say for sure it's
Okay.
true. I think there's some reasoning behind that. But yeah, we've seen it. Or the same reason you'll show up on a nest and find, 25 or 30 eggs in a nest, which is unreal for one turkey. It's because juvenile doesn't know what she's doing.
Right.
She's essentially parasitizing and dropping her eggs in with that adult hen. But yeah, it's not unheard of. I mean, for us, I would say it's fairly common. Maybe not for your everyday person in the woods, but yeah, I could see that, and you see that a lot with domestic turkeys too. Is you just find random eggs all over these places because the Jennies don't know what they're doing.
They have to learn how to be a mom.
They do.
I mean,
they
it's-
do,
it's-
and that's goes back into these old super hens, the super hen theory. If you're familiar with, in the population with how many the mortality that we see during nesting and brooding. You have a select few of hens, which how do we study that is beyond me, that are just really good at raising young from year to year, and they're the ones contributing to each generation. And with that said, what we said about talking about something else, since we're on the subject of hens and rearing young, bearded hens.
Okay. Yeah.
So I personally get hecklers all the time when we're giving presentations and stuff. The book answer is you can harvest a bearded hen. The question usually is, should we shoot the bearded
Right.
hens? Legally, you're allowed to. Okay. This is where everybody else needs to chime in. Personally, in our study area, we see hens in almost every flock we go after during trapping season. The ones we put backpack on, they're never successful. And that's just something, an observation that we've seen.
Bearded hens?
Yes.
Really?
Not raising young, not even like being able to hatch eggs. So no, I'm not saying you should take them out. It's legal, you can, but that's just an observation that we've seen is we haven't had a bearded hen yet that's been successful with raising young.
Really?
Debunked.
There you go. And that's why I said you guys chime in, because this is an observation from me, but it's something that comes up all the time. Is should we be shooting bearded hens? Legally, you're allowed to.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the story's always been that those bearded hens can be moms and have poults and all that stuff. But that's a great, observation. That's why we're doing it across the state too, because we're getting all that data from many different train types, many different areas, and that's important to put it all together. A lot of times when folks look at it, at the stuff that we do here at the Game Commission, they're thinking their backyard. And we have to look at it as a statewide brush because we're responsible from border to border. And we're so blessed in this state to have such a diverse area. From your area to your area is totally different. So between all the what you guys do out there, and what is your exact title again? You told me.
Wildlife technicians.
Okay, but
And then we're turkey trapping crew leads.
okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this on kind of a personal note: are you all competitive?
Oh, very.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually were just going back and forth on Friday about this because, he might have a really good trapping season. This has been our best trapping season out of the whole study. And as far as I'm concerned, we've hit all our quotas and we've banded the most amount of birds this year. And so, just little stuff like that.
You're just rubbing it in a
Oh,
little
yeah.
bit.
But then come, nesting or brooding season, I might have 3 successful and then they're rubbing it in my face. And
You guys have the good mamas.
Last year we did.
Yeah,
You did.
definitely
You
did.
had a really good
last
year
year we
last
had a really
year.
good year up in 3D hatching wise. So.
Let's talk about it. let's talk about a good year. What's a good year? Because it's important that people understand how tough it is for a turkey to make it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, really, there's so many factors out there. So let's talk about a good year.
I'd say if
Or is that classified information?
I don't think so.
yeah, I don't think it's classified per
Okay.
se. I'd say if a third of the birds are making a successful brood at 4 weeks, which we deem as successful, that was a phenomenal year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 1/3,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to
In
lose
my
50,
opinion,
60% of them in nesting alone,
Yeah.
just from predation
Yep.
or other.
So let's talk. We talked a little bit about Denny. So talk about how you follow the broods. You know,
Sure.
Yeah.
So after we know that nest has been left, like the turkey has left the nest, and we know that because I've got that pinger, I have those GPS locations. I could say, yep, she's far enough away. At the nest, we'll actually go in and we'll check and see how many eggs hatched, if they hatched or if something else happened. I've had some hens, it's the last week of their incubation. I'm like, oh, she's off nest. This is so exciting. And you walk in and then you check some of your other stuff and it's like, actually, she died. So yeah, and then we're going in to look at eggs and we do a very thorough vegetation analysis at that nest as well as in each cardinal direction, a random location, so that we have a comparison of what habitat types were available to the hen. And then after that nesting stuff occurs is when we're following the brood, if she's successful. So at 2 weeks and then at 4 weeks, we'll do our brood count with our thermal imaging, and we'll actually play the lost poult call. And the attempt there is to lure that hen with her babies in tow to us, wherever we're positioned. And sometimes we're out there with 3-4 folks, and we're playing it over here, and then we're playing it over there so that we can pin her in the right location. Mm-hmm. Now, I know this past year you had said about like a third of your hens were successful, and I think I had about the same, maybe slightly less. But when we're talking about success, for that nest to be successful, I need 1 egg to hatch. For that brood to be successful, I need 1 poult to make it to 4 weeks. So yeah, I had 4 or 5 successful broods out of those 50 or 60% that made it through, past June. But 4 out of those 5 were with 1 poult. Then she's not receptive to that lost poult call because she knows I only have 1 kid. Who the heck's kid is yelling?
Right.
Yeah.
So
So
it's
she
tough to
doesn't
follow,
come
yeah.
into that. And that's when typically we'll hold off on, at 2 weeks, we won't do a flush count, but we'll actually try and approach the hen and see if we can get eyes on them that way.
So flush, can they fly at 2 weeks?
Yes, like
Yeah.
2.5 weeks is when we'll typically start to see them roosting above ground, and they're up in the trees or they're on shorter logs.
And that's when they're a lot more safe to predators
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff. When as soon as they get their feathers, that first 2 weeks is crucial. That's where the habitat really comes into play
Yes.
too. That if they're in the best habitat, their chances of making it are better. And we talk about different habitats, nesting habitat, and we can go on and on and on. But let's talk about probably the most critical point of a turkey's life: those first 2 weeks, brooding habitat. I remember studies and hearing things, from the Turkey Federation years ago. And in a perfect world, what would be the perfect habitat for those first 2 weeks of a turkey's life?
So let's look first at the size of a hen versus the size of a 2-week-old poult.
Okay.
Those poults have to be able to move freely through vegetation. But at the same time, they need to be able to get to cover instantly as soon as that hen tells them to. So you need a vegetation that can cover them as well as cover her, but enough that she can see over for predation. And so, going back to prescribed fire a little bit, turkeys are on the fires. They're back in these burned areas real quick. And a lot of that is because, one, that new succulent vegetation's coming up. There's a dormant seed bank that's now available, and there's bugs. But
Burnt bugs, and they
burnt
like
bugs,
fried
they
bugs.
love fried
Yeah.
bugs.
They don't move.
But that hen can see great for predation, but there's also enough cover after plants start growing that those poults can move freely, but they can get out of harm's way pretty quick. Whereas, depending how a farmer plants his hayfield or something, that hen can't see the poults. I mean, they're little ping pong balls. They can't move through it, and then she ends up losing them. So,
And I heard Dr. Chamberlain talk about like that transition
Yes.
area from when they get to where they rear or hatch their young.
Yep.
To get to that brooding area is crucial too, because the
Yeah.
transition to get there, it has to be close to where they're
it is. Yeah, and then think of the size of the poult. Like Andrew said earlier, he had a hen take her brood less than 2 weeks, 6 miles. We haven't seen that anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's usually not that far, but for them to be able to do that, it speaks to the quality or the lack of quality of the habitat up
Or
there.
maybe she's a super hen.
She is. She could be a super hen. Some of them are really good at raising young.
Really?
Others are not.
Do y'all have any super hens in your area that you know of?
I only know of one, and that's because we were able to capture her again this year after her transmitter died and put a new one on her, and she's been successful the last 2 years.
Wow.
And so this will be the third year we can see with her. But
We need to keep her around.
yeah,
Yeah, I will actually say with that one hen that went that long distance, she ended up traveling through some pretty open woods, crossing a few creeks and rivers, and ended up back on Game Lands 135, and she pretty much hung out on one of the few fields that are back there. There's pretty soft edges. Then another hen that has a transmitter on it, fortunately hatched as well. The two of them linked up and pretty much formed a super brood.
Oh, wow.
And they all made it to their 4-week success.
So they linked up when they were before 4 weeks.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, it was right after the 2-week count that we had on both of them.
I was
where they
actually
ended up linking up,
thinking
so.
about that earlier because obviously as I get to fall turkey season, you see these flocks get together. So you're actually saying they got together that early, and
Yep.
is that common? That they,
Yeah,
we
we've
see
seen it a
super
few
roots
times.
form usually about that month time frame, if not a little before, and then that makes counts really hard because now you got to figure out who belongs to who. But going back to behaviors, you sit there long enough and watch. If let's say both broods are the same size, if they're one is clearly 2 weeks and one's 4 weeks, you can tell by size. You're going to figure out who mom is for those poults, and that's just being in the turkey world. Which
Let's talk about that. What's one thing you would see that would be telltale?
telltale is just how if the hen makes a call, how those poults respond or which poults respond. I mean, it's if she makes an alarm call and it's the poults that know that's mom's voice, all heads are going up. Whereas the others, they might continue feeding if their mother, doesn't seem alarmed at all.
So we always heard that, like, your mom's voice, your sister's voice.
Yep.
It's true in the turkey world.
Absolutely,
For sure. I mean,
absolutely.
that's why I always tell turkey hunters, like, if you hear a hen out there in places you hunt, you want to try to sound like her because those gobblers know who she is for sure. I mean, I feel pretty strong about that because every one of us, parent or friend, like, we know each other's voice. It has to be like that out there in the wild as well. Well, let's talk about the last part of this study a little bit, the gobbler part of it, because I think, so many people have blood squirting out of their eyes this time of year. I mean, they've been up listening. My daughter called me this morning walking her dog. She's like freaking out because she's hearing turkeys gobble, which is awesome. That gobble, it does something to a lot of people. So let's talk about gobblers and what we're looking at, with the gobblers that we have transmitters on and maybe what the future might hold.
Sure.
Because I think gobblers are pretty special to you in your future, right?
They are.
Okay.
I guess we can get into that then in a little bit. As far as what we've done with gobblers in this study, again, this was something that came on, the second year in.
It was 2023 and 2024.
We kind of did a
yeah.
pilot study with gobbler transmitters and then really went into this with Penn State as far as looking at crippling loss. But in addition to that, we also get to see the habitats, the movements these gobblers are making, how they respond to hunter pressure. My area comes up a lot because I like to trap game lands when I can. It makes patterning birds easier because nobody else is feeding them. But we did have an instance where we put 6 gobbler transmitters out on a game lands in the western portion of 40, I'll say, because I know some hunters that would probably be pretty angry. I start flooding people there. And last year during the spring season, not a single one was harvested, even though we know that game land gets pressured hard. There were birds harvested, just not those, and they're alive going into this year as well. Now, 2 did die as a result of predation since then. One was that eagle predation I was talking about. The other, I think, ended up being mammalian predation this past winter. But there's still 4 running around there, and it's neat to see how they respond. Like as of last week, they were all formed up again together. All 4 transmitters are mirroring each other.
They're buddies.
Whereas, they might pair off or they might go in singles. During the hunting season, and just to see the areas they use and how they respond. And it's not like they're going deep out of the way of these hunters. It's just, we say birds are gobbled out. If he don't have a reason to gobble, he might just not be gobbling, but he's right there.
Right.
And so we could get into hunting all day as far as, pressure and behaviorally patience killing birds. But it's been pretty interesting to see that as far as the gobblers go. As far as the crippling loss aspect of it, I know there have been gobblers that were harvested by hunters. They do have some pellets in them that clearly were from before, which is, what we were looking at. How many hunters are taking shots at birds and thinking they didn't kill them, and then we end up finding them dead because the mortality signals going off. But I don't know. it didn't happen often,
Right.
as far as that goes, as far as actually finding birds that were lost from crippling. So
I think one of the things I try to tell turkey hunters, and it's in today's world, where our populations are better now than they've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, there's peaks and valleys, but like when turkey hunting first started, in I forget what the number in '68, how many spring gobblers they harvested, but it was very low.
Yeah.
And back then, you hear a turkey gobble, you'd probably hunt them all season because you found one. And now there's multiples. Like you call a turkey in, and there might be 3 2-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take that shot, and they're all bunched up there together, there's a good chance of getting BBs in another turkey. I always tell people to make sure they're good and separated before you squeeze the trigger. Because I think that's important, especially when we look at crippling loss.
Oh, absolutely.
We've all seen them with gangrene. They can get gangrene from fighting each other too, which happens on a daily basis. But that gobbler study is pretty exciting, and let's talk about a little bit about the future of it.
Yeah, so the data, I'd say for that, probably what should be available 2027. That was.
Are y'all trapping gobblers too?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now
So
this,
everybody is.
this year we weren't putting transmitters out. The crippling study went for 2 years.
Okay.
This year was just our normal banding quota that we do for gobblers every year.
Right, and that's how we know harvest rates.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, so I guess that's important to highlight. I mean, we talked about transmitters and trapping, but statewide, every wildlife management unit has a turkey band quota. So
Right.
they're doing the same stuff. They're just putting out bands measuring spur lengths and beard lengths and then releasing those birds on site as well.
Do you whisper in their ear, "Don't go to a hen call"? I mean, I think that's what people think. Like we're training these turkeys not to come to calls or something.
Oh,
like
yeah,
that, but no, that's how we get our quota. That's how we find out how many turkeys are harvested. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just
No.
wanted to clear that up.
If anybody else wants to chime
But
in.
yeah, essentially the idea is we know how many bands are on the landscape because we've been banding gobblers for years now. And then we're able to look at the proportion of those that are harvested and make inferences about what the population is doing on the landscape.
Technology has definitely changed. I mean, decoys and calls and ammunition and information. I mean, this information we're talking about today is not been out there before. And when the study's completely done, the stuff that we're going to be able to help, the turkeys survive when we're long gone is monumental. I'm so excited to hear that stuff. And I know y'all are probably real excited. I mean, it's what drives you every day to get up. And I mean, if you don't love your job, and all three of you showing the passion just in your eyes, and we're talking about it. And I know one thing, it's gotten me more excited for turkey season. So let me ask you this question, and this is getting away from your everyday job. If you had one tip to a turkey hunter out there, I'll start with you. You have one tip and something you might have learned that might help somebody think of whether it's different, abnormal, or just run of the mill. You hear it every day. You have one?
I'd just say patience is key. I know a lot of people that get pretty antsy, especially when they start hearing the gobble. They want to go pretty much run and gun. But yeah, I'd just say hold tight. That bird knows where you're at, where you're calling from. They'll probably make their way in eventually.
Okay, that's a great tip and one we overlook, and it's been around forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, get the heck off the trails. Like, guys only want to go, maybe 100 yards off the beaten path. It's like, just keep walking. Just keep walking. Go deeper.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of public ground out there, and a lot of people choose to hunt private over public if they can. But go to those areas where you don't think a turkey is, because I guarantee you there's probably gobblers back there based on what we've tracked and walked up on. And it might look like you should be hunting bighorn sheep. There's a gobbler up there.
Really? They get in that goat stuff.
It is unreal.
Rocks.
And usually those are the birds you can walk within gun range of. They're just not used to seeing people up there, and so they're trying to figure out what you are.
Really?
It's
Well, that's something that I wouldn't have expected.
I wouldn't have either till I started working with them. But
Right.
it's been consistent.
Well, from everybody at the agency, thank you for what you do every day, and we can't wait to get back here next April and talk about this again. And we're just going to keep going for the stars. And when you wake up and love what you do, it's not a job. I mean, that's the coolest thing about working for the Game Commission. And we are trying to make things better, trying to learn things, and just trying to pave the way forward for the future. But from everybody at the Game Commission, thank you for what you do every day.